And good morning. We're out here at Minnamurra Headland on the south coast of New South Wales. The sky didn't quite turn on this morning. As you can see, it's a pretty cloudless sky all the way around. So I've had to adapt and try something a little bit different because the typical seascape shot of that crashing water on big bold rocks just isn't going to work this morning. There's not enough cloud in the sky to give it interest, so I can't make the sky the interest of my scene. So what I've set up here on the top of the headland is my telephoto lens, a 70 to 200mm. And I'm trying something a little bit different this morning. Instead of going for my close wide angle shots, we'll get really close to the rocks and get the water crashing and spilling over and get those long exposures. I'm standing up here on the headland and I've got my zoom lens focused tight in on the rocks where the waves are crashing over. So even though there's not much sky, luckily there's still a lot of action in the waves. So given that we've got this rugged coastline and the action in the waves, that's going to be the key of my scene today. So I've set my camera up on a tripod here. I'll give you a quick tour of my setup with the lens. So you can see this is how I've set it up. I've got my 70 to 200mm lens, and I think I'm at about 150mm, give or take. And you can see here in my composition that I've gone really tight on the rocks here. There's the coastline down there, and I've gone in just tight on this section here. And you can see now that the waves are crashing and spilling over, and it's almost creating a bit of a waterfall effect on the seascape here. So in terms of the technical considerations, I've pre-focused, so I've focused on the rocks down there, and I've set that to manual focus, so I don't need to focus each time. And I've got my release cable here, my remote release cable. So when a wave comes in, I can just hit the shutter button and just click just as the waves are spilled over the rocks, and then I get my timing just right to get that waterfall effect, because it only lasts for a second or less. So in terms of my settings, you can see here that I've set it to 1/3 of a second to help get that long exposure, so that should get a bit of a motion blur in the water. I've also got it at f10 just to help make it nice and sharp and clear. And then ISO 100. It's still pretty early in the morning. It's about 5 or 10 minutes before sunrise, so I'm still getting that nice, soft, even light on the scene. So even though there's no interest in the sky, I'm making do with the conditions that I have and just trying to see what other shots I might be able to create. And this is just the f4 telephoto lens. It's nothing special. For landscapes, you don't really need the 2.8 unless you're doing portraits or maybe even bordering on some astro. But for me, the f4 here is really great. So once again, I'm just going to be zooming in on some of these rocks. You can see here that the entire coastline is very rugged, and it should create some interesting effects when those waves crash up and spill over. I could get waves crashing up over or then coming back down. So it's a bit of an experiment kind of morning and just see what we can get. And hopefully we'll walk away with a few interesting shots that, even though the sky hasn't turned it on, even though it's not the best landscape conditions, we should walk away with a few unique photos that are of our own and really tell the story of the morning. So I'm going to go ahead here and take a few snaps and hopefully show you what we get. And one note, particularly if you set up on a tripod like this, is to get multiple exposures. With the waves, the crashing and shapes and formation is very quite unpredictable, and sometimes you might get a small wave, sometimes it might break in a different position, sometimes you might like the rush of the water rushing away, sometimes you might like it coming in. So if you set up on a tripod here, get as many exposures as you need, and then later in post-processing you might be able to combine those exposures. So for this scene here where I've composed for, just below in the bottom of the frame, after a wave has come in, the water rushes back out again, and I really like how the water rushes back out. Now, I might not be able to use that as the waves are cascading down the rocks, but you may as well get those shots like now. It's just breaking and coming back while you can, and then you can combine that later in post-processing. Likewise, as the waves are crashing over the rocks, the wave isn't touching all of the rocks, so only partial parts of the sort of coastline here are actually getting that cascade effect down. So by taking multiple exposures, I can take maybe 3 or 4 different single exposures and perhaps combine them later in post-processing. Now, I don't know if I am going to do that, but at least getting those frames here in the field that means that I have the option to do that later in post-processing. Okay, well, we got something. I don't know if they're portfolio worthy, but it's something different, something unique of this morning. So now the sun's actually starting to rise behind me. So I'm going to move around on the headland here and just scout out. As you can see, there's a bunch of different rock formations and sort of sticking out of the coast, jutting out. So every time a wave breaks, there's a new scene, there's a new landscape, seascape photo there just waiting to be taken. So I've got to explore around and get a few different angles and compositions, try a few different shutter speeds. It's good to mix it up. When the sun was a bit lower, I was easily able to get half a second to create a really nice sort of soft, long exposure. But now the sun's coming up, it's a bit brighter. I might need to quicken that to 1/10 of a second, 1/20th of a second. But at telephoto, with the speed that these waves are coming in, we're still going to get a little bit of a long exposure effect. So don't be afraid to mix up your shutter speeds, and once again, experiment, practice, and have a look. See, do you like that effect? Do you need to make it slower or longer? And just continually tweak it as you go through the morning. So let's move around and get a few new frames, and let's see what else we can get this morning. That wraps things up for this morning. Altogether, it's been quite a successful one, given there was no sky to work with. I think we did well to make the most of the conditions that we had. Towards the end there, when the light got a lot brighter, I wasn't able to do those long exposures. I bumped my shutter speed up to 1/500th, 1/640th of a second, really to freeze those waves in place and sort of freeze that motion in time. I also experimented shooting in portrait orientation, getting both the crashing waves on those sea sacks in the foreground and that island in the background as well. So when you don't have perfect skies and perfect conditions, the best you can do is really just get out there, experiment, and try to create something. So thanks for watching. I haven't done a vlog like this in a while, but if you guys like this, then I'm keen to do more in the future. Until next time, take care.